My boyfriend was broke, but I stuck by him anyway. Then one day I saw him casually gifting an expensive car to one of the Instagram models. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am. I guess I should start from the beginning. I met Jake 3 years ago when we were both working at a struggling startup. He was a charming, ambitious developer with big dreams. I was the practical marketing manager trying to keep us afloat. We bonded over long nights at the office and shared hopes for the future. When the startup inevitably folded 6 months later, Jake and I decided to give our relationship a real shot. At first, things were great. Jake was sweet, attentive, and always planning exciting dates even though we were both unemployed. He'd surprise me with picnics in the park or homemade candlelit dinners in his tiny studio apartment. I appreciated how he could make even simple things feel special. As the months went by and our savings dwindled, the stress of joblessness started to take its toll. I picked up some freelance work and part-time gigs to make ends meet. Jake threw himself into developing his own app ideas, convinced his big break was just around the corner. I supported Jake's entrepreneurial spirit, but I started to worry as bill after bill piled up. When I gently suggested he look for steady work to supplement his startup efforts, he'd get defensive. "You don't believe in me," he'd say. "Just wait, we'll be set for life once this takes off." A year into our relationship, I was working 60 hours a week between multiple jobs while Jake was still chasing his app dreams. I paid for most of our dates and outings. Jake insisted he pay me back once he made it big, but I told him not to worry about it. I just wanted us to enjoy our time together. Things came to a head when Jake's car broke down beyond repair. He needed reliable transportation for networking events and meetings of potential investors. Without thinking twice, I co-signed on a modest used car for him. It was a stretch for my budget, but I believed in Jake and wanted to support his goals. "You're the best, babe," he said, kissing me. "I promise I'll make this up to you. You won't regret it." Looking back, I should have seen the red flags, but love makes you blind sometimes. For the next year, our relationship settled into a routine. I worked constantly while Jake networked and coded. He was gone a lot, claiming he was meeting with investors or attending startup events. I missed him, but I tried to be understanding. This was his dream, after all. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a rare Saturday when I didn't have to work. I decided to surprise Jake by bringing lunch to his co-working space. As I pulled into the parking lot, I saw Jake standing next to a brand new Tesla. That was odd. Jake couldn't afford anything close to that on his own. Before I could get out of my car, a stunningly beautiful woman walked up to Jake. She threw her arms around him in a big hug. Jake laughed and spun her around before handing her a set of keys. The woman's eyes lit up as she looked at the Tesla. "Oh my God, you actually did it," she squealed. "I can't believe you bought this for me." Jake grinned. "Only the best for my favorite Instagram star. Consider it thanks for all your consulting work." He made air quotes and winked. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Jake had bought this woman an expensive car? The same Jake who couldn't afford to pay me back for dinners or his own used Honda? The Jake who was supposedly broke and struggling? In a daze, I started my car and drove away before they could see me. My mind was reeling, who was this woman? Where did Jake get that kind of money? And why was he spending it on her instead of paying back his debts to me? When I got home, I did something I'm not proud of. I snooped through Jake's laptop that he'd left at my place. What I found left me speechless. It turns out Jake's app wasn't just a pipe dream. It had actually taken off in a big way 6 months ago. He'd been raking in serious money but hiding it from me. There were emails about investments, offshore accounts, and plans to expand the business. I also found messages between Jake and several Instagram models. He'd been lavishing them with gifts, trips, and money while telling me he was broke. The woman I saw today, Amber, seemed to be his favorite. Their chats were flirty and intimate, talking about meetups and private photo shoots. I felt sick to my stomach. All those times I'd scraped together money for dates or bills, Jake had been secretly wealthy. All those late nights he was working, he'd been whining and dining Instagram models. I must have sat there for hours, trying to process everything. Part of me wanted to confront Jake immediately. Another part wanted to pretend I'd never seen any of it. but I knew I couldn't ignore this betrayal. When Jake finally came home that night, I was waiting on the couch. "Hey, babe," he said casually. "Sorry I'm late, got caught up in meetings." "Really?" I said coldly. "Meetings with Amber in the Tesla you bought her?" Jake's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me, Jake. I saw you with her today." "I know about the app's success, the money, the other women. How could you do this to me?" "Find out like what?" I exploded. "That my boyfriend's been lying to me for months? That you've been living it up while I work myself to the bone? That you're buying cars for Instagram models while I'm still paying off the Honda I got you?" Jake held up his hands. "I know it looks bad, but I can't explain. The app took off faster than I ever imagined. I wanted to surprise you once everything was stable. These girls, they're just for marketing. It's all business." I laughed bitterly. "Business, right? Is that why you're calling Amber your favorite and planning private photo shoots?" "That's not, Jake stammered. "Save it?" I cut him off. "I trusted you. I supported you when you had nothing. And this is how you repay me?" "I was going to tell you everything," Jake insisted. "I was just waiting for the right time. I wanted to do something big, maybe buy us a house. While you're buying cars for other women." I shook my head. "I don't want your money, Jake. I wanted honesty. I wanted a partner who respected me." We talked, argued for hours that night. Jake swore up and down that he loved me, that the other women meant nothing. He offered to buy me anything I wanted to make up for it, but material things weren't the point. The trust was broken. The Jake I thought I knew, the struggling dreamer I'd fallen for, was a lie. In his place was a stranger who valued flash and status over loyalty and honesty. In the end, I told Jake I needed space to think. He reluctantly agreed to stay with a friend for a while. As he packed a bag, he tried one more time to smooth things over. "I really do love you," he said softly. "Everything I did, I was doing for us. For our future, I just got carried away with it all." I wanted to believe him. Part of me still loved the person I thought he was, but I couldn't get past the months of lies and deception. "I love you too," I said. Or at least, I loved who I thought you were. I don't know if that person ever really existed. After Jake left, I spent days alternating between crying and raging. I felt like such a fool. All those times I defended Jake to my friends and family who thought he was taking advantage of me. Turns out they were right all along. I also felt conflicted about what to do next. Should I give Jake another chance? He seemed genuinely remorseful. Maybe with counseling we could work through this. But could I ever really trust him again? Then there was the money issue. Jake had offered to pay me back for everything. The car loan, the dates, the bills I covered. Part of me felt I was owed that much at least. But another part felt like taking his money now would be selling out my principles. After a week of agonizing, I made my decision. I texted Jake asking to meet at a coffee shop to talk. When I arrived, Jake was already there, looking nervous and disheveled. It was clear he hadn't been sleeping well. As I sat down, he reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Jake," I began, "I've done a lot of thinking this past week. About us, about trust, about what I want in a partner." He nodded, eyes hopeful. "I've been thinking too. I know I messed up badly. But I love you and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right." I took a deep breath. "The thing is, Jake, I don't think you can make this right. The trust is gone. Every time I look at you now, I see all the lies and deception." "But I've changed," he insisted. "I've realized what's truly important. I'll be completely transparent from now on. We can start fresh." I shook my head sadly. "It's not just about the lies, Jake. It's about your values, your priorities. You chose flashy cars and Instagram models over honesty and loyalty. That's not the kind of person I want to build a life with." Jake's face fell. "So that's it, you're just giving up on us." "I'm not giving up," I said firmly. "I'm choosing to value myself. I deserve someone who appreciates me, who's honest with me even when it's hard. Someone who doesn't see me as a backup plan while he's out living the high life. You're right, Jake said quietly. You do deserve better. I just wish I'd realized that before I screwed everything up. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of 3 years and 1,000 what-ifs hanging between us. Finally, I stood up. I should go. I wish you the best, Jake. I hope you figure out what really matters to you. As I turned to leave, Jake called out, Wait, what about the money? At least let me pay you back for everything. I paused, considering. It would certainly help my finances to accept his offer, but something in me rebelled at the idea. Keep your money, I said. Consider my support and investment in the person I thought you were. Maybe someday that person will actually exist. With that, I walked out of the coffee shop and out of Jake's life. The next few months were hard. I threw myself into work, picked up new hobbies, spent time with friends. Anything to keep my mind off Jake and what might have been. There were moments of weakness where I was tempted to call him, to see if we could work things out. But I stayed strong, reminding myself of all the reasons we were better off apart. Slowly but surely, I started to heal. I realized that as much as the breakup hurt, it had also freed me from a relationship that wasn't serving me. I no longer had to carry the financial and emotional burden of supporting Jake's dreams. I could focus on my own goals and aspirations. About 6 months after our split, I ran into Amber, the Instagram model, at a local boutique. My first instinct was to turn and run, but curiosity got the better of me. Hey, I said, approaching her. You probably don't know me, but I'm Jake's ex-girlfriend. Amber's eyes widened in recognition. Oh, you're the one he was always talking about. That surprised me. He talked about me. Amber nodded. All the time. He felt terrible about how he treated you. Said you were the best thing that ever happened to him, and he blew it. I didn't know how to respond to that. Part of me was touched that Jake had spoken well of me. Another part was angry that he could recognize my value and still treat me so poorly. Can I ask you something? I said hesitantly. Amber nodded. Were you and Jake involved? Amber looked uncomfortable. Not really. I mean, he flirted a lot and bought me things. I think he wanted more, but I told him I don't get involved with clients. Clients? Yeah, for the app marketing. A bunch of us influencers were hired to promote it. The car was part of my contract, not a personal gift. I felt a mix of relief and renewed frustration. So Jake hadn't been sleeping with Amber, but he'd still been dishonest about the nature of their relationship. Thanks for telling me, I said. I appreciate your honesty. As I turned to go, Amber called out, Hey, for what it's worth, I think Jake really regrets how he treated you. He seemed pretty messed up about it the last time I saw him. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I left the boutique, my mind was swirling with conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated knowing that Jake regretted his actions. Another part was angry that it took losing me for him to realize what he had. And a small, traitorous part of me wondered if there was still a chance for us. I pushed that thought away firmly. Even if Jake had changed, too much damage had been done. I deserved someone who valued me from the start, not someone who only appreciated me in hindsight. Over the next year, I focused on rebuilding my life. I got a promotion at work, started taking classes towards an MBA, and even began dating again. None of the men I met quite measured up to what Jake and I had had in the beginning, but I refused to settle. Then, on the anniversary of our breakup, I received an email from Jake. My heart raced as I debated whether or not to open it. Curiosity won out. The email was long and heartfelt. Jake apologized again for his behavior, saying he'd spent the past year in therapy working on himself. He talked about how losing me had made him reevaluate his priorities. The app was still successful, but he'd stepped back from the flashy lifestyle and was focusing on using his wealth to make a difference. I know I have no right to ask this, he wrote, but I was hoping we could meet for coffee sometime, just to talk. I understand if you don't want to, but I'd really like the chance to apologize in person and show you how I've changed. I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure how to respond. Part of me wanted to delete the email and continue moving on with my life, but another part was curious. Had Jake really changed? And even if he had, did it matter? After much internal debate, I decided to agree to the meeting. I told myself it was for closure, a chance to finally put the past to rest. But if I'm being honest, a small part of me hoped to see a glimmer of the Jake I'd first fallen in love with. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd had our breakup conversation a year ago. Jake was already there when I arrived, looking nervous but more grounded than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," I nodded, not trusting myself to speak just yet. Jake took a deep breath. "I know I hurt you badly, and I'm not here to try to win you back or excuse what I did. I just wanted to tell you in person how sorry I am and how much I regret my actions." He went on to explain how the sudden wealth and attention had gone to his head, making him lose sight of what truly mattered. "I thought I needed all of that flashy stuff to be happy," he said, "but all it did was cost me the best thing in my life, you." I listened quietly as Jake talked about his journey over the past year, how he donated a significant portion of his wealth to charity, how he'd started mentoring young entrepreneurs, teaching them the importance of integrity alongside business skills, how he'd finally paid off the car loan I co-signed with interest. "I know it's too late for us," Jake said, his voice cracking slightly, "but I wanted you to know that you made me a better person. Even though I didn't appreciate it at the time, your love and support changed me. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." As I listened to Jake, I felt a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me was touched by his apparent transformation. Another part was angry that it took losing me for him to grow up. And a small, confusing part of me wondered if there was still a spark of what we once had. "I appreciate you telling me all this," I said carefully. "I'm glad you've made positive changes in your life." Jake nodded, looking hopeful. "I know I have no right to ask, but is there any chance we could try again? I'm not the same person I was." "I'd spend every day proving to you that I've changed." I took a deep breath, considering my words carefully. "Jake, I'm glad you've grown and learned from your mistakes, but the trust between us is broken. Even if you've changed, I'm not the same person I was either. We've both grown in different directions." Jake's face fell, but he nodded in understanding. "I get it. I just had to ask to know for sure." "I think," I continued, "that what we had was special for a time. But that time has passed. We can appreciate what we meant to each other without trying to recreate it." Jake smiled sadly. "You're right. As usual. I guess I was holding on to hope that we could go back. But we can only move forward, can't we?" I nodded, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. "Exactly. I'm glad we had this conversation. It helps give me closure." We talked for a while longer, catching up on our lives and reminiscing about the good times we'd shared. As we prepared to leave, Jake reached out and squeezed my hand gently. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. For believing in me when I had nothing, for teaching me what really matters in life, and for being brave enough to walk away when I lost sight of that. You deserve all the happiness in the world." I squeezed his hand back. "So do you, Jake. I hope you find it." As I walked out of the coffee shop, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The anger and hurt I'd been carrying for the past year began to dissipate. Jake and I had both made mistakes, but we'd also learned and grown from them. In the months that followed, Jake and I occasionally exchanged friendly messages. We shared news of career successes and personal milestones. It wasn't the passionate love we once had, but it was a mature, respectful friendship built on our shared history and mutual growth. As for me, I threw myself into my career and personal development. The MBA I had started paid off with a significant promotion. I traveled, made new friends, and eventually met someone who valued me from the start. No deception, no games. Looking back, I realized that the painful end of my relationship with Jake had been necessary for both of us to become the people we were meant to be. It wasn't the happily ever after I had once imagined, but it was a story of growth, forgiveness, and moving forward. And in the end, that was worth more than any fairy tale ending.